sounded like from what you all were saying, we definitely have folks from all over the state here, and we're going to be talking about gerrymandering in the whole state. Unfortunately, it's the whole state. It's not just up here. So I'm glad to have you all with us. We're a group that came together, I think about a year ago, and we include specifically about 7 counties, but we work with, we collaborate with a bunch of other groups around the state. You know, we all just want to end gerrymandering together. So glad to have you all here. So we're really excited to share this information with you about fair maps, which is the goal, and gerrymandering, which is what's happening right now. I personally didn't know much about this issue until about 1 or 2 years ago. And after coming to an understanding of what it was, it became one of my personal top issues that I want to change, because it really seems like I won't be able to see much significant change in anything that's important to me until gerrymandering ends and our legislators actually have to start listening to us and what's important to us. So I'm really excited to end gerrymandering with you all. My name's Kathleen. I live just south of Amory in Polk County, up in the northwest corner of the state. I've been specifically leading some teams in our area around getting referendums and resolutions passed. Specifically right now, we're working in Polk County, Buffalo County, and Pepin County. I'll talk more about what that means later. And then Douglas.
Hi, I'm Douglas, and I'm similar to Kathleen, relatively new to the gerrymandering issue, but my big issue is climate change, and there's no way to move climate legislation without fair maps. So I'm here tonight to help you learn a little bit more about how we can do that together. Next, yeah. So we are part of the Western Wisconsin Nonpartisan Voting District, launched back about a year ago, roughly. And we're in collaboration with League of Women Voters for our area, the Greater Chippewa Valley, but we're part of the bigger Wisconsin Fair Maps Coalition. Our goal is to build grassroots power to bring an end to gerrymandering in Wisconsin. And as Alice Walker said, the most common way to people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. We're here tonight to show the difference. We're going to cover what the impact of gerrymandering is, some short and long-term solutions, how you can get involved, and we'll end with a question period, an opportunity for you to ask us more questions. Now we're going to break into small groups so that we can get to know one another a little bit better, because our feeling about this form of cultural change is that we can do that best through relationships, and by getting to know people who are also interested and involved, that we can make the change happen the fastest.
So Janelle's going to put us into groups of 3 to 4 people. If you just want to share your name, where you live, maybe why you decided to come to this meeting. And you could also think about if you have any specific things you'd like to learn about gerrymandering, or any questions you have about it. You could talk in the group. I hope you all enjoyed connecting with other people here. I did. Really nice to meet some of you. So Janelle's gonna share our slides again, and we're just gonna go right into our presentation so you all can learn a little bit more about gerrymandering and its impacts. And I will just say again, as a gerrymandering baby myself, like I haven't been aware of this issue in detail for very long. It's only been a year or 2. And I have been able to understand it. So you have hope too. It's not as confusing as it might seem. So we'll attempt to kind of simplify it. First, we're going to show you part of this short video produced by the Wisconsin Farmers Union. And it's pretty to the point. It has some really helpful graphics in it. And it is kind of fast, so we'll definitely unpack it afterwards to make sure you understand the main points of it.
Just the first couple of minutes.
Perfect. Over the last several years, Wisconsin has repeatedly made national news for having some of the most gerrymandered maps in the nation. Let's take a look at what that means. State lawmakers represent the people who reside in a defined area called the legislative district. Wisconsin's legislative districts, created by the majority party in the legislature in 2011, were found by federal courts in November 2016 and in January 2017 to be an unconstitutional political gerrymander that unfairly dilutes the votes of over half the state's citizens in violation of both the First and the 14th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution. The current partisan map was purposely drawn to favor one political party. Using computer modeling and sophisticated data algorithms, legislators in the majority party pack voters of the opposing party into as few districts as possible, so the minority wins big in those districts, but doesn't win many overall. On top of creating some oddly shaped districts, this also sets the stage for extreme partisanship. Elected officials don't hear from constituents with other points of view because they've all been drawn into other districts. In fact, the districts have been drawn to so heavily favor the incumbent that new candidates don't even bother to run for office. In 2016, 38 of 99 state assembly candidates ran unopposed in the general election. For democracy to thrive, we need competitive legislative districts and real elections. Not only does partisan gerrymandering poison our democracy, it's expensive, and Wisconsin taxpayers are footing the bill. Rather than drawing fair, nonpartisan districts, Wisconsin has spent over $4 million to defend the current gerrymandered maps. Tax dollars should be used for public needs like roads, schools, and infrastructure, not to defend political battles the majority of citizens do not support.
All right, so there's a lot packed in there that hopefully was useful. I really like those visuals. So just to kind of go over some of those points again of how gerrymandering impacts us, it makes legislators unaccountable to their constituents. Since the maps were drawn so that most incumbents cannot lose, like they said, they used computer programming basically to create maps where the candidates running against incumbents could not win, pretty much. There's no way. And so if someone knows that their job is going to be secured for 10 years, they're not going to have to listen to anybody. And then it decreases competition. So in, like we said, since the maps were drawn in such a way that virtually the candidate who's running against the incumbent cannot win, it's going to be hard to get people who want to run against them because they're pretty much going to lose. So it just decreases the competition. And we know that for there to be a healthy democracy, we need competition so we can keep people in check. We can get new leadership. We don't want to just have the same person stuck in there for 10 years, no matter what. Another thing is that it deprives Wisconsinites of equal representation. And kind of one way to explain that is you might look at the total number of votes for the minority party, which right now is Democrats in the legislature. But the majority party, which is Republicans, still holds more legislative seats because of gerrymandering, even though they might have gotten more Democratic votes because of the way that the maps, we're going to look at a video next that kind of explain this more, but the way they draw the maps kind of cracks people into different districts. So it dilutes their vote and they don't really get fair representation. Another one that I feel like they explained well in the video was it's expensive. The partisan district maps have resulted in very expensive court battles and we're paying for it. They've spent over $4 million to defend our current maps, which to me is just outrageous. We could do so much good with $4 million for our state. And then the last point is that it just leads to really extreme partisanship, which I know we've all been seeing play out lately, especially. And, you know, political opinions in the state can sway from election to election, depending on how people are feeling about the candidate. But when one party dominates in a very unnatural way because of these maps, it leads to such extreme partisanship, and no one's going to want to work across the aisle because they don't have to. And I think most of us would like to see people working together. So Janelle's gonna play another video for us. It's a short film that kind of shows how you can draw maps in a way to favor one party or another. And it also shows how you can draw the maps in a way that doesn't give anyone an unfair advantage, but also acknowledges that in some places, even if some people in specific areas might have similar thinking, that you're not taking advantage of that. So you can go ahead and play it, Janelle.
Partisan redistricting, or gerrymandering, is about fractions, percentages. These coins represent voters in an evenly divided state, 50 dimes, 50 pennies. They elect 10 representatives. That means each district map must contain 10 coins. Of course, real people don't live in neat rows, so let's mix them up. This is our hypothetical state. Let's see what happens if the dimes draw the maps. 10 coins in each district.
So first thing we do is pack the pennies. Give them 2 safe districts, but pack them solid. The remaining 8 districts are won by the dimes, by smaller but still comfortable margins. The dimes win 8 districts and the pennies win 2. The dimes overwhelmingly control the legislature.
Of course, if the pennies drew the district lines, the opposite could happen. Let's rig it for the pennies.
For the pennies, we pack the dimes into 2 safe districts and crack the remaining 8 districts and win by the same margin, 8-2.
Well, now that we've destroyed democracy, let's consider how this would look if the maps were drawn based on compactness and keeping communities of interest together. You get evenly divided districts in an evenly divided state. There are some that go heavily dime, there are some that go penny, but that's to be expected. People live where they live, and that's what democracy is about. It's not about party bosses rigging elections for them.
Welcome to Stanford Legal, where we look at the cases, questions, conflicts, and legal.
I'm going to pass it off to Douglas to talk about the next slide.
So Wisconsin, because of its just geographic characteristics, we have Democrats concentrated in a couple of areas. Milwaukee, the Madison, and the north you can see there. That makes it a little bit more difficult to create a fair map, but point is that we have fairly equal percentage of Democratic and Republican voters. In the last statewide votes in 2018, we had elected a Democratic governor. Meanwhile, we retained a strong majority of Republicans in both the state assembly and the Senate. But there are ways to do this more fairly. So we'll look at a couple of examples. Here on the left side is the former congressional district boundaries. On the right side is the current boundaries. And you can see they were shifted in a way that kind of mixes them up and makes the edges a lot more less uniform and tilted to ensure that the party is retained as opposed to who actually lives in the district. So on the next slide, here in my county of Dunn, it's the rectangle there at the bottom of the center of this slide. We have 4 different districts that different representatives that represent the single county, which makes it so much more difficult for our county administrators to go to Madison and ask for their issues to be dealt with. They have to deal with 4 different legislators. If we move a little bit to the west, we see in the next slide, St. Croix County, District 30 extends down into Pierce County. And one of the reasons that this was done was to split the vote that's Democratic, highly Democratic within the city of River Falls. So by cutting half of the city into the 93rd and half into the 30th, it diluted the Democratic vote. Next slide is back to Kathleen.
Yeah, so this slide just really highlights that Wisconsinites want gerrymandering to end. We do, the majority do. If you look at this map on the left side, this isn't actually even totally updated, but you can see how most of the counties are some shade of purple. And that means they've either passed a resolution or a referendum in support of nonpartisan redistricting and fair maps. Just to kind of give you a better idea of what that means, a resolution is when the county board passes a recommendation saying that they support a nonpartisan procedure for the fair maps, and a referendum is when they put language on the ballot that each person who votes can vote yes or no. Do you want a nonpartisan procedure for redistricting the maps? And all of the referendums have passed, most of them with like a high margin. And another way to show that is this table over here is a poll that was done by the Marquette School. And basically what it shows is that at least 3/4 of voters want a nonpartisan commission to draw the maps instead of the legislature or the governor drawing the maps. I'll pass it off to Douglas.
Yeah, so we're going to look now at the different possible solutions. The People's Map Commission is currently underway, and we'll have some more details about the commissioners in a moment. They have a series of hearings across the state based on the congressional districts. Longer term, we're looking at new legislation that would establish a nonpartisan committee that would draw the districts as opposed to allowing the legislature to control the process.
So a little bit more about the People's Maps Commission. Governor Evers created this nonpartisan commission, and people that were chosen to be on the commission, they were chosen based on criteria or to keep balance. So based around the region that they're from, their race, and there's a pretty nice gender balance. And so just trying to keep it as nonpartisan and balanced as possible. So they've been doing virtual hearings around the state to hear what's important to people to include in each district map. And that could be, maybe it's important for people to have their county be in one district, or maybe it's important for them to keep their city in one district, or maybe a specific cultural group wants to be in one district so they can have fair representation, things like that. And in the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about how you can be involved. So they've been doing this for a few months. They've had hearings, virtual hearings around the state for each district. There's 2 public hearings left, one on February 25th in the 5th district, and then one on March 11th around in the 2nd congressional district. And anyone is welcome to join in listening to those hearings. And if you're interested, you can testify live at the meeting and kind of talk about what's important to you in your district. And you can listen in and watch them even if you're not from that district, or if you're interested to see how maybe your district already had their hearing, you can go back to the website and look it up and watch it now. You can go to the website. Janelle just put some links in the chat box to just the basic People's Maps Commission website. And then there's a link so you can submit your own testimony if you have something that's really important to you about your district. You can just submit a written comment on the website. There's a link to register to testify at one of the hearings. And there's also Fair Maps Coalition is hosting a testimony training if you want some training on how to do that. If you maybe want to testify, but you're a little bit unsure, need some tips. And that's on Saturday, February 20th.
It's also possible to look back at the basically recordings of the earlier hearings, and they have some really excellent testimony, not only from the local Wisconsinites, but some experts that talk about specific issues related to gerrymandering.
Yeah, I agree.
So this slide here is detailing what we expect in terms of the timeline. So at the moment, People's Maps Commission is continuing to gather this input from experts and the general public regarding what we feel are important in criteria for these new maps. We expect that the census numbers will become available sometime in the late summer, early fall. At that time, the People's Maps Commission will create their version of the map based on this open process of public input and using this criteria that keeps it more balanced. At the same time, the legislature will be creating their own maps, and we anticipate that they'll be just as biased or maybe worse than the ones we have now. Because of that, the governor is most likely to veto what the legislature drafts. And at that point, we're anticipating it will go to court. But our goal in the interim is that we can get as much input to the legislature as possible regarding getting the maps as fair as possible. So we expect that new legislation will be introduced that would result in a nonpartisan committee for future redistricting. And one model that's worked very well is in Iowa. It's now been in place for the past 4 different iterations of the census, and there's never been a legal challenge to the results that came out of their nonpartisan commission. This bill, Assembly Bill 303, was introduced last year, and we expect Senator Smith to introduce something quite similar once the testimony to the People's Maps Commission is completed and the governor has signed off on those recommendations. Right now, we want you all to get in touch with your own legislator and have a conversation with them about issues that are important to you and stress your desire for fair maps.
So you all might be wondering what you can do in this effort. A quote that kind of speaks to this is, "Democracy is not a state, it is an act." So some ways that you can act. One thing you can do that Douglas just talked about is contact your legislators and let them know how you feel about gerrymandering and what you would like to see happen. Maybe you would like to see fair maps and see some legislation passed that'll ensure that we have fair maps every 10 years going forward. Something else that you could do is participate in the People's Maps Commission in all the ways that I kind of described before. You can watch them, you can submit testimony of what's important to you. And then another way you can get involved is by joining us in whatever way works for you. We have several different teams in our specific group. if you're in Western Wisconsin and you're interested, we have a team that's working to communicate what's happening in the People's Maps Commission. We have a legislation and writing team kind of helping people contact their legislators and letting people know what's going on in that realm. We have a referendum resolution team, and we also have a social media team. And with all those teams, I think there's definitely room for people who want to lead more and have more say in what we're doing and what we're planning. And there's also a role for people who just want to help out every once in a while and don't have a lot of time to commit and in the middle. So I would specifically recommend, if you're in Polk or Buffalo County or in Pepin, that you reach out to us so that you could help in the next couple months getting the referendums and the resolution passed. And there's definitely a lot to be done there. Again, room for whatever kind of participation you can give. And Janelle's going to put a link in the chat box. If you feel like you want to be involved in a big way or a small way, you can fill out that Google form and we'll reach out to you and get you connected. And even if you're not from Western Wisconsin and you want to just fill it out with your information, we could definitely connect you with people who are closer to you in your region or your county. So there's definitely lots of ways to get involved. And another great way is to share with everyone who's your friend, your family, in your networks what you've learned tonight, and see if they want to get involved and do something about ending gerrymandering. Because one thing I've definitely learned is that if you want to see change, you can't do it by yourself. You gotta work together. So it's really grateful to you all for showing up tonight, and I hope you learned something. And we're gonna take some time for questions or comments now. So if you wanna ask a question, maybe just raise your hand, or if no one's speaking, feel free to just speak up. Anne, go ahead. And Griffin. And you're also muted, so remember to unmute yourself.
Okay. I would like to just make a comment that I actually have a Fair Maps yard sign in my basement at the moment because it seemed unreasonable before this last election. But as soon as the snow melts a little, I'm ready to put that out. It's not only useful to have people see it, but they'll say, what is that? And I think that's a better way to talk to people. So it would be nice to get lots of the yard signs out again.
Love that idea. Yeah, we're definitely going to be putting those out in Polk County, and but I think everywhere would be great. And I think we could also help get you signs. So that's something you could add in your comment if you filled that form, or if you contact us in another way. We can definitely get you.
I also had said earlier in the smaller group that I know of a really good video that explains the gerrymandering, and yours is exactly the one I was talking about. It's so clear. So I'm really glad you have it.
Great. Yeah. Jim Nelson, nice to see you. What's your question or comment?
So my question is so the Republicans will draw the map based on the election, and then if Evers, like they predicted that he, so then it doesn't go back to the Senate, it goes to court. Is that the step? They don't send it back to redo it. They send it forward to the courts and let them figure it out.
Yeah,
something like that.
That's how it's happened in the past and how it will most likely happen this time.
It's unlikely the legislature would draw something that Evers would sign. So that's why we're anticipating it going that way.
But I do like the idea that there would be a good alternate choice to look at, so that we're not just saying, oh, we don't like that map, but we can say this is the map that we should have.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point, Ann.
And
Did you?
that's what we expect the People's Map Commission will
Right.
produce.
Right, I like that.
You're gonna say something else?
Okay,
Jim?
and another thing is that, I don't know if people know this. Yeah, I wanted to say that, I think the podcast, 538, or they have a whole series on gerrymandering. So they have about a 7-part series. And one of them is on Wisconsin specifically, and it gives an introduction to it. So I don't know if you're aware of that, or, but it's, I just kind of stumbled across it the other day looking around. But in my podcast, I just typed in gerrymander, and that came up. So it's like I say, it's a 5 or 6 or 7-part series of specific gerrymandering issues and examples. So if anybody's in the podcast stuff, that's pretty helpful.
Great.
Jim?
So, oh, there's my hand.
How about Barbara Peterson?
Yeah, I have 2 questions. First of all, I'm not technical enough to be able to know, once we leave this meeting, how do we find those web links? Because I don't know how to, they're in the chat, but once you leave the meeting, I can't see the chat. So so it's hard for me to, maybe somebody can explain that to me. But secondly, I wanted to say that sometimes it's hard to get started in writing a letter to your legislator. For instance, I was thinking during the whole impeachment trial about writing a letter, and I couldn't, every time I started one in my mind, I kept being a little indignant, not a little indignant, a whole lot more indignant. My words were not well put. So one time I still belong to the group that was publishing, they published letters, and then you had the option to be able to change the letter anywhere you wanted to. But in that letter, you could put bullet points make the points that we want to be made to our legislators in terms of how they should be looking at this legislation, expressing how we feel about it, choosing the points we want to talk about. Then it's a whole lot easier for me to put together a letter. Is that something that this group would want to do?
We do have some on the PC Grow website. Do you want to explain how to get there, Janelle?
Ah, excellent.
Yeah, we do have some, although it's through a password protected area for people who are part of our group. So you have to become part of our group to get access to the letters. But when I send the follow-up email, because everyone that registered, I now have your email address, I'll send out the links that Barbara is mentioning that were in the chat, so you have access to them. And then I'll send you a link to some example letter to the editors that were written that are from the Fair Maps Coalition. So there's lots of examples, and you can read through them and see if there's anything that would be helpful for you, and you're welcome to take it. And then the other thing is the League of Women Voters has done where you can send an email to your legislator on this issue. And as soon as I find that, I will drop it in the chat, but I'll also include it in the links when I send out the follow-up email. So if you want to go that way, then you can use the great tool that the League of Women Voters have put together.
Because it does occur to me that we're going to want to share these with other people. We need a mighty voice. And so getting that word out to others who can also be writing is key, I think.
The other thing we've prepared is a really extensive documented 5-page frequently asked question handout. And so that's there to review. We're in the process of distilling that down to a simpler kind of 3-fold brochure that could be handed out. So we're still working on the ways that are most effective to reach out to as many people as possible. So that's one reason we're here tonight, is to get more people involved and help them.
Are there any other questions or comments?
The referendum that you spoke of, is that in April? But just for your area? I mean, we don't have it.
What county are you in, Ann?
Milwaukee.
Okay. I'd have to look at the map again. Janelle, do you know off the top of your head if they passed anything? But I'll just say,
I'm sure there isn't a referendum because I didn't, well, I mean, unless it's something that's after the primary that I would have seen, but yeah, I'm always pretty aware of what's on a ballot, but maybe I just haven't seen the April ballot yet.
Yeah, so this April, oh, do you want to say something,
I
Douglas?
was just say, looking at the map, Milwaukee has passed it, but some counties have been passing these for several years. So it may be that it wasn't last year, but it was a couple years ago, and so it wasn't at a time when it was super high on most people's radar. So you probably voted yes and didn't think about it maybe more, you know, who knows, but
right.
People have been doing this for a few years now.
I definitely would have voted yes.
I got a question. So just on the, someone mentioned about, well, so when we click off of here, we will get an email with the links on it. Is that how that works? This is this is my second meeting on the video that I've been. I've had, you know, I've dealt with them, you know, for years at work, but then this is not work. This is outside of work, and I'm retired, so I don't have to work part. But that's what I don't know what happens when I click down. Will we get information that comes, you know, via our email? And I see that the website. So if we go there, will this information be there too?
So Janelle there's definitely a lot of information on the website, but Janelle's going to send an email out to everyone here afterwards. And I also would just like to congratulate you that this is only your second video meeting. I've been on way too many this year. We'll definitely.
Well, yeah, you should try retiring. If you retire, you don't have to do so many.
We'll see. Yeah,
you
should get all the links.
You get busier when you get retired.
Oh yeah, except when you do it in the pandemic. You get a lot of time outdoors and walking around and stuff like that. So yeah. But another question I have. So I said podcast. So does everybody know what podcasts are? Do they know do they have access? Because, you know, I'm just a young guy of like 66, and I'm like really I asked people about them my age, and I kind of get, oh yeah, but when I really dig into them, most of them don't have a clue how to get the podcasts and figure out that. So I'm just saying, is if I give you a link, find the link to that, can I send it to Janelle, and then you can put it on something, because it's really actually interesting. There's a lot of useful information in that, and I think that group that it puts that out, I think it's 538. And they actually have some kind of program, but you know, they have they're working to make gerrymandering, you know, a thing of the past. But the podcast is a couple of years old, so I don't know where they are now.
Jim, if you send it to me, I'll check it out, and I'll be glad to add it to the email. And I'm just curious to see if anyone else has any questions. I know the time's coming to a close, so I just want to make sure everyone gets to get their question in if they have one.
I have one thing to add. A lot of people think, well, contacting your legislature, what good is that really going to do? But in my Dem group, Patty Shackner was our state senator until she got gerrymandered out. And she makes the point that when you contact, whether by email or phone call, your legislature, that stuff is recorded. And so when you're emailing or phone calling and saying, I want you to support fair maps because your constituents, and I'm one of them, support fair maps, and then you can, through the Freedom of Information Act, somebody can get that information. You can, but someone else can. I mean, lots of groups can. And then you can say to this person, look, you got 6,500 calls between this date and this date saying supporting fair maps, and then how could you possibly vote against them? Because you're not doing your job. You know, you owe us. We're paying you. So It does good to contact your legislatures, even if it feels useless and fruitless. It isn't. It does matter.
Excellent point. Yeah, thanks, Carol.
Yeah.
Has anyone been frustrated with trying to reach their legislator?
Well, they don't ever answer.
Yeah, that's the point. That's an example of the impact of gerrymandering. They don't bother to respond.
Barbara Peterson, were you gonna say something? Okay, I thought I saw your hand going up.
I have a question. So when you're saying legislature, you're talking about assembly, state senate, or our congressmen, are all of the above, because the maps are being drawn at the state level, right?
Yes.
And does the maps for the congressional districts get drawn at the state level too?
Right.
Okay.
The purpose of the census is to apportion the House districts. We have 435 House districts, and they need to get apportioned by population across the United States. And so some states gain enough population that they get an extra legislative seat, and other states either are holding steady or losing population, so they lose a congressional district. But along with that, the goal is that each one of those congressional districts on down to the state district level are equal in population. So that's one of the things that the computer programs do, is they figure out how to manipulate the block by block decision and still get an equal number of voters in each one of the districts. Big difference.
Heather, do you want to? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Heather.
I put it in the comments, but the kids and I wrote our senator, who's no longer our senator, but last fall, and she actually got our letters and decided to stop by our house and swing in and say hi to us and let us know that she got our letters. So that was pretty cool. We also wrote to Rob, and he did send us a letter back too. So
I'm going to guess that was Patty Shackner.
Patty's the one that stopped in at our house. Yes.
You bet. You bet she did.
That's the problem with gerrymander, that we lose a perfectly great senator and get some guy like we got now. That's why.
That's really awesome, Heather, that you got that experience.
Yeah, the kids and I thought that was pretty cool to have somebody actually show up and listen to what we were writing to her about. So she had us call down to her office, and then we got a letter back from that too. So
excellent.
I feel like that's kind of an image of what all of our legislators could be like if they actually had to work for us.
That's right.
Thinking about that.
I don't mean to be rude, but I'm going to have to leave because I want to listen to the president. So thank you so much for your information, and I will I'll look for that email, and I'll see what I can make out of it and get doing something around here.
Thank you for being here tonight, Barbara.
Thank you so much for the presentations.
Mm-hmm.
Goodbye.
Yeah, anyone new want to say anything or ask any question before we part?
So one last thing I'll say is the big difference between the nonpartisan process is that we don't want to look at past voting records versus the Republican process that they used with this advanced computer program looks very explicitly at how people voted. So that's how they make a decision to include a block or leave a block out. And the map then looks kind of crazy with that wild edge. So thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Take good care.
Thanks for your support, Janelle.
Yeah, look forward to hopefully connecting with a lot of you after this.